So I've just finished basting the foam to the two gusset C exterior pieces, and just wanted to show you very quickly what that looks like. I have a gap here where I don't have any foam, and I used a contrasting thread color so you could see my zigzag stitching that I use to compress the foam in the seam allowance. So I'll set these aside for now, and then we're going to continue with step 9 in the pattern where we start to do the exterior assembly. Okay, so we're now starting the exterior assembly with step 9 in the pattern. What you need to do next is take your 2 exterior main panels and your 2 exterior top band pieces, and we're going to start marking the centers. So you'll want to fold each main panel in half like this and mark the center along the top and the bottom. Actually, sorry, you want this on the right side as well. You don't need the bottom center mark on the right side, only on the wrong side, but you'll want this center mark here on the right side. And then we'll do the same for this one. This one I want the center mark on the bottom on the wrong side. I'll do it on the top as well, just in case. And then I fold it this way, and I want the center mark here at the top. And then for the top band piece, I really just need the bottom center mark. So where it curves downwards, that's the bottom edge. You want to add your center mark there on the wrong side. So okay, and now you'll take one of your exterior panels and you'll start by lining up those center marks, right sides together. So you're lining up the bottom center mark of the top band with the top center mark of the main panel. And then you'll want to clip the rest of the way. And you're sort of following, you're sort of folding this so that you're following this bottom curve of the top band. And I'll add lots of clips, and then I do the same on this side. And then you're going to go over to your machine and you're going to sew these two together. Okay, you'll start and sew all the way across. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So I have sewn the top band to the main panel, and before I press the top band away from the main panel, because there's a curved edge and I want it to sit nice and flat, what I usually do is I just clip into the seam allowance a little bit. You can clip, notch. I find just clipping does the trick. Okay, now that's done. What you're going to do is you're going to press the top band and the seam allowance up towards the top of the bag. And then we're going to go over to the machine and we are going to top stitch the seam allowance along the bottom edge of the band. So now the seam allowance has been top stitched. I'm going to turn this so it is wrong side up, and you're going to take the main panel pattern piece. Oh, here's my pen. And now we're going to mark the location of our pleats. So you just line up the fold line with the bottom center mark. And what I usually do with this center mark is I just make it a little arrow, this, so that I know that that's my center mark and not a pleat mark. Then I place this like this. And I just transfer the pleat marks to the wrong side. Then I flip this over, and I've actually transferred the pleat marks to the wrong side of my pattern piece. And I do the same thing on the other side of the center mark. So you should have a total of 4 pleat marks. Now, I don't usually pin my pleats in place. I just go over to my machine and I pinch and I pleat at the same time. I just find them a little bit too small to pin, but for the video here, what I'll do is I'll just show you how I pleat. So it's important that, I usually pleat from the wrong side. If you want to pleat from the right side, that's fine. You'll just have to do the reverse. But I think it's just simpler if you just follow the same way that I'm doing it so you don't get confused. So with the wrong side facing up, you're just going to go to the first pleat mark and you're just going to pinch the fabric so that you have a pinch that is about 1/4 of an inch deep. And then you're going to fold that. So you're just flattening that pinch and you're going to fold it away from the center mark. And then you use a pin or a clip to hold that in place. And then you do the same thing with this one. About 1/4 inch, and then you fold it over. Now with the 2 pleat marks on this side of the center mark, you're going to pleat them. You're going to pinch them first, and then you're going to, again, you're folding them away from the center mark. So you're going to have these 2 pleat marks being folded down this way and these 2 pleat marks being folded down this way. Now you're going to be doing the same exact thing for the other exterior panel as well as your 2 lining panels a little bit later on during the lining construction. So this is what it should look like from the right side of your exterior panel. So I'm just going to go over to the machine and I'm just going to quickly base stitch these in place so that I don't have to worry about them coming undone. And then all of the steps that we've just done, you're going to repeat with the second exterior panel and the second top band. I just wanted to quickly show you, this is what your pleats should look like from the right side when they're done. And then I will flip this over, and this is what they should look like, from the wrong side. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with these 2 pieces. So now you're going to take your gusset exterior pieces and you're going to place them right sides together and pin or clip them along this middle straight edge. And then go over to your machine and sew them together. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now that the 2 gusset pieces are sewn together, I'm going to press open my seam allowance. And then I'll go over to my machine and I'll top stitch the seam allowance along both sides of the seam. Now I've used fabric, black fabric, so it's a little bit harder to see the stitching. Hopefully you can see. So I've top stitched on both sides of the seam and I'll set this aside for now. Now you're going to need your D-ring connector strap. Now if I can only find where I put it. Oh, here it is. Okay, so if you're using vinyl or cork, you're not going to be able to press both halves of the strap in towards the center. You're going to have to draw a line down the center and then go over to your machine and fold in towards the center and sew. As you're folding, you're going to be sewing, and you're going to sew it with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from that center. Since I'm using fabric, I don't have to do it that way. What I'm going to do is I'll still draw the line down the center, but I'm going to use my iron and I'm going to fold and press towards the center instead. So I'm not going to show you pressing the entire thing. I'll just get it started and then I'll finish the rest off camera. I used my medium weight, so it's a little bit, takes a bit more time to press it because it's a little bit more structured. Okay, so I'm just going to press both sides the entire length. Okay, so I'm going to pause and I'll finish pressing this and then I'll show you the next step. Now for the next step, you're going to need the D-ring strap connector that you've just pressed in towards the center or sewn towards the center. So because I'm using fabric, I actually don't need to stitch it down in the middle because it's just, I know it's going to stay this way. If you're using cork or vinyl, you should have sewn down along the center with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the center line. You're also going to need your D-rings at this stage. Now, if you're using cork or vinyl, you're going to need to use double-sided tape. And like the pattern says, you're going to want to place a strip along the center, but you don't want to tape all the way to each end. You want to stop about 2.5 or 3 inches away from the shorter ends. Again, because I'm using fabric, I'm just going to use pins. And what I will do is actually I'm going to pause and go get my pins because I forgot them. I'll be right back. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to slip the strap through a D-ring and then you're going to fold the strap over itself about 2 inches. So wrong sides together for about 2 inches. And I'm actually just going to use a clip to hold this in place for now. And you're going to do the same thing for the other side. And you fold it 2 inches. Okay, that's about right. And add a clip. Okay, so now you're going to need to find the center of your gusset. And it's 4 inches, so you want to have your center mark at 2 inches here. And we want to mark the centers at both ends as well. And that is about 1 1/4 inch from either side because it is, oh, actually, sorry, it's 1 1/8 of an inch. My mistake. Okay, same on this side. Now, if you're really good at centering something, you can go ahead and place this on here right away. If you're not so sure, you might want to make center marks halfway as well. So before it starts to narrow, it's still 4 inches, and you should make a mark at the 2 inch in the center. Grab my pattern that I dropped on the floor here. Okay, so if you're using double-sided tape, you'll want to peel the backing now and you're going to glue it in place. I want this to be perfectly centered. So I'm actually going to fold it like so. And then I'm just going to put a pin where the center is. So. Okay, and then I know I can align that with my center seam. And I want to make sure that the strap is centered. Okay, so if you're using double-sided tape, you're gluing it in place. I am not, so I am going to just use pins. Now you want to make sure I need a bigger table for a long gusset like this. For this part here, you just want to make sure that the center mark here falls into the center of your strap connector, your D-ring connector. And place a pin. Okay, and then you'll do the same for the D-ring on this side, and then add a few pins all the way just to make sure that it stays centered for the next step where we sew it to the gusset. Okay, so I've pinned the entire strap to the gusset, and another tip that I have to make sure your strap is centered. Now it won't really show when you're carrying the bag if it's not perfectly centered, but if you're like me and it bugs you, then you can just go along the entire length and make sure that your spacing is consistent on both sides. So at this point you should have 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. And just measure along the entire length just to make sure that the spacing is consistent on both sides. Now we're going to sew the connector strap to the gusset. And what we're going to do is just start, you can just start, sorry, that's my iron shutting off. We can just start here along the edge, and you're going to sew it down with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to go all along this edge. And then when you get close to your D-ring, and make sure that you use your judgment and leave yourself enough room for your presser foot beneath the D-ring. So you're going to stop and rotate and sew across underneath the D-ring, and then you rotate again and sew along this entire length, and then stop, rotate, sew, and then when you get to your original stitching, you make sure that you back stitch. So I'm going to go over to the machine and sew this in place. Okay, so I've sewn the connector strap to the gusset, and I'm really regretting my choice of using black because I have a feeling it's difficult to see. So I'm just going to bring it up closer to the camera, and hopefully you can see this. Okay. I like to add rivets at this point, so I'll pause, and I'm just going to add a rivet here and here just beneath the stitching underneath my D-ring. Now my gusset is ready to attach to my exterior panels. So what we will do is start by lining up that bottom center mark with the center seam of your gusset. And you're going to want to pin those together, right sides together. And then the second thing we pin is actually the top edges to the top corner of your main panel. And do the same thing for these top corners. Now we're going to pin everything in between, and I usually like to pin with the main panel facing up, and then I get the gusset to follow the curve of that main panel. I have stuff flying everywhere right now. Now, if you were way off with your pleats, if you made them way too big, then you might have a little bit of issues with all of this lining up. But I do find the pattern is fairly forgiving, even if you're not really precise with your pleats. That's one of the things I like about pleats on bags with gussets, is that if you made a mistake and your gusset's not fitting well, you can just adjust your pleats. I like to add a lot of pins or clips along the curved edges. Okay, now I'll pause and I'll finish clipping here. Then we're going to go over to the machine and we're just going to sew these together. Start at a top corner, make sure that you backstitch, and then follow and sew all the way. And then when you get to this corner, make sure that you backstitch again, and then you can trim your seam allowance. Then we'll repeat the same thing on this side to attach the second exterior panel. So I have both main panels sewn to the gusset. I'm just going to trim my seam allowance very quickly and then turn my bag right side out. Sorry, you have to watch me do some boring cutting with my scissors. And then this is pretty much the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to do our zipper assembly with our zipper panels and get that ready for the final assembly video. So there's my seam allowance trimmed, and we just turn this right side out. Okay, and there's our pleats that give the bag some depth. Okay, so next video we will start with the zipper assembly.